Roadie Strength Podcast is now brought to you by Rob Levine, the heavy hitter. We've been really happy to have him jump on as a sponsor. I've personally used them this past year. My wife was in a car accident, and they were able to help us along every step of the way through getting properly compensated, making sure we weren't getting taken advantage of by the car insurance companies, and helping through with medical payments. So if you've been in a car accident, it's definitely worthwhile. Just pick up the phone and see how they can help. The Roadie Strength Podcast is now sponsored by Athletic Painting and Carpentry. For all of your exterior painting, interior painting, cabinet and door resurfacing, cabinet installation, cabinet remodel, floor refinishing, carpentry, lead renovation, and power washing needs. Give them a call at 401-675-7973. Follow them on Instagram at athletic_painting_ and follow them on Facebook at Athletic Painting and Carpentry. They are an honest, local Rhode Island company that does great work. All right, we'll get started. So what's going on, guys? Dr. Matt here, host of the Roadie Strength Podcast. We got another special guest on today, Dr. Zach Carton.
No worries.
So you're a medical doctor and physician over at Stride Souls. You're also CMO and co-founder with Greg Gerla.
That's right.
And I had been introduced to you guys through Steve Peary, who I went to physical therapy school with. So I'm very, very happy to have you on. Thanks for coming on.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
So to start these off, I like to start off with a couple rapid fire questions. So these are just kind of for fun, but just to get the conversation going. So first one, and you're in Massachusetts, right?
Yeah, I'm right in Boston.
Very cool. So first question is favorite coffee shop.
Oh man, I thought you said there would be no hard questions.
I lied.
Yeah. For Boston, I'm a big fan of Cafe Nero, if we're talking chains.
Yeah, totally.
Card, get a lot of free drinks. Yeah, that's my spot.
Good call. They have solid coffee there. Next question we got is favorite recent book. Doesn't necessarily have to be recent, but a book that comes to mind that you've liked.
Well, right now I'm reading this book called The Stand by Stephen King, which came out a long time ago. And it's very good. It's one of those, it's actually about a virus that gets out of control and wreaks havoc on society. So maybe a little bit too familiar, but very good. I'm about halfway through. So if you've read it, don't ruin it for me.
No, I haven't, and I've recently gotten into the Stephen King books a little bit, so I might have to add to the list because that sounds really good.
It's excellent.
Yeah. Next question is somewhere you've traveled recently. Could be work, pleasure, either or.
I just went to Ibiza off the coast of Spain, which was awesome. Yeah.
Very
I
cool.
wish I was still there, but awesome.
Did you enjoy? I know that's one of the things that area is known for is like the nightlife. Did you enjoy any of the nightlife there?
I didn't do any nightlife. No. Yeah, nightlife was awesome, but the surprising thing was that it was actually very family friendly for the most
Sure.
part.
Sure.
There were a lot of like kids, small families. It was not as crazy and wild as I thought it would be. It was actually
Sure.
pretty lovely overall.
Very cool. Next question I got for you, and this one I'm particularly interested in because it relates to the whole premise of the podcast and what you're doing. But
What
favorite
I'm most nervous about. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
favorite shoe or sneaker, and this could be maybe like or you could do two answers. Maybe like what do you like to work out in, and maybe what you like to kind of like walk around in.
Yeah, so I think I have an answer and it's for both, but and it's pretty basic, but I love the classic Air Force One.
Nice. Yeah, that's you're not the first person to say that, so
Yeah,
there we go.
I know. I can feel my friends making fun of me already, but yeah, Air Force One.
Is that a workout shoe or a kind of
Yeah,
like a
it's a
walking shoe?
workout shoe. It's a honestly, the first time I like decided this was gonna be my shoe, I was doing a rotation in radiology, and the chief radiologist, he was just sitting at his desk reading MRI scans, and he was wearing these sick Air Force Ones, and I went, "That's the type of doctor I'm gonna be," and yeah, Air Force Ones.
I love it. That's a great answer. Next question we got. What do you like to do right now for your fitness or your workouts? What are you into?
Yeah, so I go to the gym like 5 days a week. So predominantly weightlifting, and I'm on like a classic push pull leg split. Nothing that interesting or fancy.
Hey, back to
Yeah.
basic. I love it.
Yeah.
And then what? I don't know. Are you from the Massachusetts area?
Yeah, that's like it's a tough question. I grew up in New Jersey, but now I've been living in Massachusetts for almost a decade. So I think
Okay.
by now
Okay.
I'm allowed to say I'm from. It's funny,
Sure.
I actually before or part of starting Stride schools, I went to business school to sort of do my entrepreneurial journey, and I went to business school in France at this very international school. It's called INSEAD, and what's cool about it is the student body is capped by the percentage of students that represent any one country. I'm going to get the percentage wrong, but maybe it's something like 10% of the student body can't be from, or more than 10% can't be from any one country. So China, France, Germany, England, you name it. And I think something like 100 countries were represented. And people were asked all the time, like, where are you from? And it was very interesting trying to answer that question depending on where the person was in the other country. Like, if a Chinese person asked where I was from, if I just said like New York, that meant like Washington, D.C., New York, Boston. To them, it's all the same. But yeah, people who are from Boston, they know I'm not actually born and raised here.
Good. That's a very, very good answer. Yeah, I like that. So the follow up to that would be what's your favorite sports team? So I don't know. We'll see if it's are you keeping your New Jersey roots here or
Yeah, so I grew up in Princeton, New Jersey, and everybody kind of has to pick if they're going to be a Philly sports fan or a New York sports fan. And if it's New York, like, are you Yankees or Mets? But I'm a Mets fan. They're my favorite.
nice.
It's been a painful journey, but here we are.
I like it. Good answer. All right, so getting into the backstory of Stride. So, like I said, Steve Peary, I went to school with. He was a year above me, physical therapist, great guy, smart guy in orthopedics, and he introduced me to it because he knew I was doing kind of my own thing with the sports related PT, and I got connected with you guys. But curious how you guys how the idea started, and then how you guys ended up creating the business of Stride Souls.
Yeah, it's actually a good story. A lot of the startup stories that happen where there's like some incubator and people get together and think and they come up with something, but ours was very kind of lucky and serendipitous. So I graduated medical school at the University of Massachusetts in 2022. And um, based on that graduation date, COVID hit while I was a medical student. And I happened to be involved in a task force that implemented telehealth solutions throughout the hospital. And there's something about it that it's hard to really describe, but there was something about it that I found amazing that you could do this remote patient care, that it was changing the way healthcare was practiced. And as part of this task force, I also got to interact with administrators, IT personnel, and I guess a lot of people that the typical medical student doesn't interact with. And it kind of got me set on this business journey. And when I graduated, instead of doing a clinical residency, I ended up working for a startup also in Boston, and they made an ultrasound machine, I guess, um, a little cradle that an iPhone or a smartphone would slide into, and it allowed women to do their own prenatal imaging at home. And it was like a FaceTime call where you'd hit start, the OBGYN on the other end, you'd see their face there, but instead of them seeing your face, you put the phone on your belly with this cradle and they could see the baby ultrasound. And it was like,
Wow.
I thought it was the coolest thing. It gave me an appreciation for the smartphone being a medical device. And I also was amazed by how much patients loved kind of the control or peace of mind, or just a whole breadth of part of clinical care that you don't talk that much about in medical school, the kind of the enjoyment, cool, fun, engaging aspect of care. So I had this swirling around in my head. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I started business school in France. And it just so happened that my co founder, or future co founder, Greg, did an exchange from his business school in Chicago to France right when I started. And he had flat feet his whole life. So he was used to going to the podiatrist and getting casted, whether it was with a laser scanner or actually doing like the paper mache thing that they do. Um, and he had good results, but he needed a new pair. And of course, they weren't built in time for his trip to France. So he was like hobbling around miserable because his feet were killing him. And he just put something in the healthcare group chat. Hey, anybody want to work on a startup idea about custom orthotics? And then we met. I told him about my experience with this ultrasound machine, and we thought, well, why not put the entire ordering process into a smartphone? And that was kind of how the idea was born.
That's really cool. Yeah, like you said, it was almost out of necessity, and like,
Yeah,
hey, this could be there could be a better system out there. You know?
exactly. And we knew that uh, laser scanning or using different 3D scanners was quite commonplace, and a lot of clinicians we spoke to would use attachments to like an iPad or something, and we thought, well, why not just use the FaceTime camera, or I guess the one that does Face ID to unlock it does a
Right.
3D scan anyway. Um, and then with that idea, we kind of just the rest isn't as glamorous. We started trial and error, developing an app, working with different contractors. We needed a huge database of foot scans to train a model. So I got made fun of a lot for trying to acquire all these feet pictures, which we can go into. And I think the real critical part is we needed podiatry practice to kind of be our experts in this. And we wanted some group that was very innovative, that was willing to do a lot of trial and error to get the right product. And um, we ended up calling this was the least glamorous part. I think we had this big spreadsheet of maybe 250 different clinics and manufacturers throughout Europe and the United States because we were in France at the time. Greg and I
Mm.
are American. And yeah, we called like uh, all these clinics. They all had different ideas, but the one we settled on was based in Germany. And they had made a lot of the orthotics for players in the German Bundesliga, the soccer league, a lot of professional golfers, as well as like lots of, you know, I don't want to say standard patients, but people who weren't professional athletes that just suffered from flat feet or plantar fascia or whatever it is. And yeah, we've been working with them ever since, and it's been an awesome journey.
That's really cool. So they already had somewhat of a knowledge or experience based with, I mean, patient population, but also athletes at the highest level in Germany.
Exactly, yeah. So Greg and I both, we are not pedorthists or orthotists. I'm a physician, but I didn't specialize in feet. I'm not a podiatrist. So we needed some group to really lend expertise and not just the prescription of orthotics, but the
Mm.
design, and also to have, we wanted them to share our philosophy that orthotics don't have to be a very it doesn't have to be where you go to your doctor, you explain the problem, they refer you to a podiatrist, you wait, I don't know, 2 months to get an appointment, you go, you discuss it, they make it for you, they ship it out to some lab, that takes another two. We didn't want it to be this big annoying process. We wanted to really make this accessible to patients everywhere, and they really kind of were on board with that idea.
That's really cool. Yeah, I didn't realize that. To me, when you guys had explained or when I looked it up, like the German manufacturing, I'm like, oh, they also making like I don't know, whatever similar material could be, I don't know, toothbrushes or something like that. But no, they're making like they're used to making like soul or like working with these athletic populations
Yeah,
with products. So that's cool.
they have an entire like sports podiatry lab where they take some of these top athletes and they have like it's what you imagine with the pressure plates and
Mm,
cameras and different body sensors that they hook up, and they experiment to come up with sort of the right, we call them modalities, like additional modalities on the orthotic, like a little bit of wedging here, a little bit of sinking or depression over here, that helps the athlete not just feel better, but perform better for their sport.
sure, sure. Yeah, there's a lot of to get a bit off topic, off topic. There's a lot of interesting like shoes over the past like 5 years that like Nike has come out with this like it's like oh like this new sole and it has like people are running world records in like this type of sole and
Yeah.
like this type of thing. So like there's some really interesting stuff coming out with like the whole like the materials, the purpose of the sole and what they can do for performance.
Yeah, the soul technology coming out is amazing. I see it everywhere. I also like my Instagram, the ads that I get. I was never expecting to get so many like shoe, whatever, focused advertisements towards me. But you're right. The technology that's going into the construction of shoes is unbelievable. I think where the big gap is the
Mm,
insole. And
sure.
actually, like, I had a friend just get a pair of Air Force Ones, and I was just curious, like, for them to take out their insole. I use stride soles in my shoes now. I think I have to as the co-founder, but I also I can vouch for their benefits. But I had forgotten like how flimsy the standard insoles are for all these shoes. And uh,
Sure. Sure.
my fiance, I tried to take it. She has lots of different sneakers. I took all of them out, and it's like carte blanche, always very flimsy. Um, as part of that, very little support. They wear down very easily. And even though the soles provide a lot of benefit, the insoles, I think, do a lot more and a lot less attention is paid to them by these shoe companies.
Totally, totally. They're just throwing anything in there and be like, all right, here you go.
Yeah, exactly.
I have them right here, just so people who are visual viewing. And I do want to get into the kind of like the whole like the grate technique that you guys use and everything. But this is obviously the model for one of the shoes here. And there's like obviously there's parts that are flexible. There's parts that are a little more stiff, depending
Ex-
on where it needs to be, which is cool.
Exactly. Yeah, so I'm happy to talk about the insole design process, whatever route you want to go down.
So you talked about it a little bit already, but and I just actually I don't know if you might see a notification come through. I just did another foot scan
Oh,
right before
okay.
this podcast, just to kind of like remind myself how the process worked. And I gave myself, because I couldn't remember because it had been a while, so I gave myself a good like 30 minutes to do it, and I was done in 2 minutes
Yeah,
less.
yeah.
I'm like, oh yeah, this was incredibly simple to do, but very cool. So can you go over how the like the phone scanning process works?
Sure. So let me just start from the very beginning. The
Sure.
process is designed so that anybody can do it, not
Mm.
necessarily a podiatrist, not necessarily a physical therapist or gym trainer. Any lay person should be able to go through the process. That said, we work with a lot of physical therapists and other non-podiatrist or non-podiatric clinicians because we want to increase accessibility in any way. So if that means the patient goes to a PT and the PT can offer the custom orthotics, that's a win for us. It's a win for the patient. It's a win for the PT as well. So let me just throw that out there that this can be done either by a clinician or an end user who doesn't know the first thing about custom orthotics casting. Um, so yeah, the system is very straightforward. There's a 3D foot scan that is kind of self-directed on the iPhone. Right now it's just for iPhone. Then there's a questionnaire that takes about 30 seconds to a minute to fill out, where we ask questions about your sort of foot pain, your medical history when it comes to foot, ankle, knee health, things like that, and then also your preferences when it comes to shoe type. So we can make them for any type of shoe. If you're an athlete, we do it for cleats or hockey skates or skis. And if you're someone who goes to work every day and you need to wear dress shoes or business shoes, we do it for that as well. And then the last thing is the shoe size, which is funny because we get a lot of questions. Why do you need to take our shoe size? Shouldn't you be able to tell if you're doing a really good foot scan? But it turns out that it's remarkable how many people wear the wrong size shoes for their feet, and we want to make sure that the orthotics fit their shoes, their shoe preference, and their foot. So yeah, take a picture or scan of your foot with the phone, answer a few questions. You have the option to record a gait analysis, which is just walking to and away from the camera. So our podiatry team on the back end can see if your ankles are unstable or knees are unstable while you walk. And after you submit this information, it gets sent to this podiatry team in Germany that we work with, and their licensed podiatrists go through um, everything that you input, and then they design the custom orthotics, and finally we 3D print and ship them right to your doorstep.
That's very cool. Um, and along the lines of like when the step when it goes into Germany, um, how does that work with the? I know there's probably we'll get into the nitty gritty a little bit with how the tech's doing it, but how does the 3D printing work exactly?
Okay. So yeah, so what happens is The podiatrists get all this raw data from you, and they build the orthotic in a computer system. So they take your foot scan, they see where your pain is, and they make adjustments based on that. So, for example, if you say that you've been suffering with a lot of ankle pain recently, mostly on the outer side, there's going to be a little adjustment that decompresses that area, and maybe a heel cup that stabilizes the ankle. And that all gets built into some kind of computer model using the software CAD. I don't know if you're familiar, but
Sure,
it's
sure.
fairly common. And with that computer file, you can, in a sense, send that to any 3D printer in the world, and it'll print out exactly as they designed it, as long as the material you put in is what they recommend.
Gotcha. All right, that makes a lot of sense. Really cool. So a couple questions on just general like frequently asked questions I think that people have is some of the stuff you guys had on the website, which is beautiful by the way, as I was on the other day.
I
um,
did not know how bad of a website designer I was until I tried to do it. It's, yeah, but thank you.
It looks good. One of the things that I'm putting it in quotes: cork sinks, foam compresses, and plastic hurts. So you guys use a material TPU bioplastic and vegan leather. Um, so can you run me down kind of like the differences between materials and why you guys decided to go with that one?
Yeah, so the what we were trying to get at is we see a lot of products on the market that espouse certain things about their orthotics, where in reality, it may not be as effective as they're trying to say. So when we say cork sinks, what we're trying to say is that there's a lot of orthotics out there that are built with cork, and they say that your foot will they're accustomed to your foot because over time your foot sinks into it, and in a
Mhm.
sense you get this reverse imprint. But the problem with that is if you have foot pain and there's something structurally wrong with your foot, it doesn't exactly make sense to have a perfect inverse image of your foot. In a sense, it allows your foot to maintain the wrong structure, the wrong architecture.
Right.
We say cork sinks to kind of get that across as quickly as possible. Um, I think the other one you said was foam squishes.
Foam compresses, foam
Oh,
squishes. Yeah.
compresses, yeah, which is essentially the same thing. Walking on a cushion might feel good for a short period of time, but after a while, a lot of these insoles that are just foam based will compress and they won't offer you support after a couple of weeks. And they suffer the same problem as the cork insoles, where the insoles end up adjusting to your foot rather than your foot adjusting to the insoles, if that makes
Right.
sense.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah.
but we build corrective orthotics. So the idea is that whatever is causing your pain or wherever the architectural deficiency is, our orthotics are built and designed to correct that rather than accommodate it and just let you kind of continue to suffer the architectural problems that are whatever is causing the pain in your feet. And then
Got
the last point about the plastic hurts, um, they're especially with podiatrists in the US, they build orthotics using rigid plastic. And
it.
they very quickly will put your foot in the correct architecture, and kind of like a brace. It just shoves your foot into the right spot. That can be very painful initially, but over time, people do tend to feel good in them. The problem is it doesn't give your foot enough time to adapt to the new architectural structure. So the best kind of, and I've tried to think of a lot of analogies for this, but a good one is braces. If you
Yeah.
for your teeth, if
Yeah.
you got braces and you had your teeth just immediately pulled into like a beautiful aligned orientation, as soon as those braces came off, all your teeth would fall out because the soft tissue needs to slowly adjust in order to
Right.
make those changes permanent. And very rigid plastic orthotics suffer a similar outcome where as soon as you take them out of your shoes, once your foot has kind of adapted to the new strength or the new shape, the soft tissue hasn't had kind of that gradual process of
Mhm.
changing, and any benefit that you get from the orthotic will not be long lasting. And we try to,
Makes
of
sense.
course, with ours, be kind of the Goldilocks where we put the foot in the right position, but because we're able to design our insoles with a lot of granularity based on the 3D printing strategy, we allow the foot to slowly and gradually adapt to the right architectural shape. And instead of muscle atrophy or ligament shortening or anything like that, we find that actually after enough time, people can grow out of our insoles. Their foot can regain arches, bunions can be corrected, and pain relief can be a permanent outcome.
That's cool because I think a lot of people who have this idea in their head about orthotics is that, oh, I'm gonna have to wear these for the rest of my life no matter what. But I saw you had written that in a few other places on the website too. And then you're like the goal is to get your feet better.
Yeah, I
So
think
I'm
we say heal
yeah,
out of your orthotics,
right.
which is the
Heal out of
ultimate.
them. Yeah, which
Yeah,
I don't think I've ever seen an orthotic position themselves in that way. Like which is
I
cool.
know.
Which is cool.
I know. From a business standpoint, it might not be the best like point, but from a health, I think it's what we're
Yeah.
trying to have our patients experience. And actually, on that note, it allows us to kind of work very well hand in hand with physical therapists like yourself, because that's kind of the mantra of physical therapy is like helping the body heal itself. And we
Right.
very much, our philosophy and for our orthotic insoles is to do that, um,
Right.
to
Right.
help the body almost provide a framework for it to rebuild and regrow, as opposed to kind of just shoving it in the right position.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And from a business, you made a mention like from a business perspective might not be the best, but the PT profession is the same way. We're trying to heal people so they don't need us anymore too.
Exactly. No, it's true. But uh, I think that philosophy, uh, aside from I think it being the right when it comes to
Right.
medical
Right.
uh, fact, I think it's also the best in terms of building like a patient trust environment.
Right.
That's what we're trying to do, especially because there's uh, a big remote component to this, which is always difficult when you're trying to build any kind of connection with patients. So it's very important for
Exactly.
us to
Exactly.
cross.
I like that. A question that I actually had from earlier. I don't mean to beat this part to death, but with the phone scanning, you had mentioned another thing you had mentioned is another way that it's commonly done is either paper mache or laser. Have you guys, and I think you had mentioned this at some point, but the accuracy of the face scanning versus some of these other styles of collecting a foot mold.
Yeah, so the literature is not that prescriptive in what is the best way to capture the mold. Some papers say 3D scanning is the best. Other ones saying doing kind of casting gets you the best. Uh, Others even recommend foam impression boxes. So a lot of it comes down to user preference. That
Hmm.
said, I think what separates our process from the typical cast or scan or anything else on the market is that our scanning app is built with a machine learning model. And I think I alluded to this earlier that we trained this on this huge database of foot scans, which we were given access to by partnering with this really cool podiatry clinic. And I think that's one of the things that makes our IP really special.
Hmm.
That we can capture a foot scan taken by a patient who doesn't necessarily know how to hold their foot in the right position, subtalar neutral for people who do know. And we can artificially, on the back end, estimate what their foot would look like in subtalar neutral. And we can also estimate what it would look like if it was partial weight bearing or fully weight bearing. And that gives us a very, um, I would just say, a much bigger data set per patient to build a smart orthotic for them. Every
Totally.
single type of scan or weight bearingness has its pros and cons. And I think the really cool thing about what we do is because of the machine learning model, we kind of get all the pros without any of the cons.
Totally, totally. And this might be just a follow-up question on that, which is I think basically that you already answered this, but to say it another way, one of the things I had asked when I first talked to you guys is like, oh, how is this different from like the if you go to CVS and you step on like the Dr. Scholl's thing and you get the foot scan with that, and obviously you've already mentioned a lot of reasons how it's different, but could you explain that a a little closer
Yeah,
to?
so first, let me say that that has been one of the best marketing gimmicks in custom orthotics, or sorry, in orthotics in the past like 30 years. It worked
Mm,
really well for Dr. Scholl's. The problem, and I kind of beat myself to the punch, is that it's more of a marketing gimmick than anything else. Um, the foot scan that the patient stands on for those things doesn't actually take a 3D model of the foot. What it does is it can sense maybe if there's some weight asymmetry, and it may be able to tell if the person is flat-footed, and that's basically it. And then when it comes to the customization, the machine will do some really simple algorithm and pick which of the five orthotics Dr. Scholl's makes off the shelf is right for that person. But like I said in the very beginning, all of those over-the-counter ones are built with a tremendous amount of foam, and they're not corrective. They accommodate. So no matter what it recommends, it will probably feel good for a couple days, but slowly your foot is going to compress the orthotic. The orthotic is not going to change the architecture of your foot, and that pain that drove you to get orthotics in the first place will come back. We
sure.
see this time and time again. Yeah.
Totally. That makes a lot of sense. And I think with those as well, it doesn't only have like at least when I see them in the CVS store, it only has like three different models, right?
Yeah, so I mean,
Yeah.
what does custom mean if it's only one of three? I think I'm, it's not going to come as a surprise to anybody that everybody's foot shape is different. Everybody's walking gait mechanics are different, and everybody's goals are different. If it's just to feel good, if you're standing all day, or if it's a sports performance improvement that you're looking for, and there's just no way that three base models can take all of that into account.
Totally. And you've mentioned this a few times, but I think it's good to just reiterate with the active stimulation of the so the stride promotes more of an active stimulation or uh, a fixing in other words of the
Corrective, corrective.
factor. Yeah, corrective. Versus a regular insole would be more like a passive support. And a question on that would be, is there any level of, and this probably would be case by case. But is there any level of like assumed like, hey, this is gonna take a little while for your foot to kind of get used to maybe like a breaking in period or like maybe some level of discomfort at first as your foot is kind of learning how to use these areas that it hasn't used in a while, essentially?
Yeah, great question. So first, I just was speaking to a group of podiatrists the other day, and they all had different philosophies about orthotics, but they said they all agreed that the best orthotic is the one that gets rid of pain. So we don't want anyone to put our insoles in and feel pain or real discomfort, even though there is a breaking in period, which I'll speak to.
Right.
For people that have never worn custom orthotics before, a lot of them are surprised by what it does feel like because you feel support in areas that typical insoles, when in my Air Force Ones, for example, that I bought, they're just not going to touch certain parts of your feet, or the way you walk may be subtly changed because the big soles that we were discussing that are on all the modern footwear that have amazing performance benefits, maybe when it comes to running, they also promote things like heel striking and can cause pain up the connected chain. And our insoles force people to kind of prevent that strong heel striking and rebalance the foot a little bit. So there is an adjustment period, but I would not describe it as painful. Rather, it's kind of like it's kind of it's like I don't know. Any new pair of shoes has like a little bit of getting used to. I'd say it's more like that. Um, the thing that we do hear a lot is people have muscle soreness, like you would when you were working out, in parts of the legs they weren't expecting or had never even felt before. And a lot of that is because people's gait mechanics are corrected to a more natural form that they just haven't been doing their whole life because modern footwear allows for so much kind of unnecessary pressure impact. And we correct for that. And uh, your muscles that maybe were initially a little bit more dormant now have to take some of that load on, which is good in the long term, but might be a little surprising.
I think that's a great answer. I don't know how much it reminds me of a similar concept with like some of these barefoot shoes that are coming out. I don't know how familiar you are
Yeah, I
or
think
what your
barefoot
thoughts
shoes
are on
are
those. Yeah.
yeah, so I think barefoot shoes are awesome, and I think they do correct a lot of the issues with modern footwear. Number one of which, again, I'll say it again, is just too much pressure impact on the heel strike. Um, for example, Hoka shoes, which I see everybody wearing now, and I've tried. They're crazy comfortable, but that
Mhm.
heel is like this,
Yeah.
and you can just pound your heel into the ground, and you won't notice any pain initially, but that sort of pressure shock does go up the entire kinetic chain. It impacts the cartilage in your knees, your hips, your back, and over time, that leads to arthritis and a lot of other chronic pain symptoms. Barefoot shoes, by their very nature, just don't let you have
Yeah.
that kind of heel striking, and they do allow people to build muscle and tendon strength in the bottom of their feet. There's just two problems with barefoot shoes. One, and this is personal, and I apologize to all my barefoot shoe wearers out there, they just don't look that cool to me. I don't think that they don't look cool to me, but you also probably can't wear them if you're going to an important business meeting or I don't know if you're going to be walking in some kind of fancy area or I don't know. They don't go with everything. Put it put it nicely. And then the second part is that they don't work for every type of sport. So if you play soccer, or you ice skate or ski, the barefoot shoe technology just isn't going to translate into those activities. Um, and uh, I was gonna say they do run the risk because of sometimes they do run the risk of having like injuries from if you're walking on the sidewalk. If there is a really big rock or something like that, you can still get the the injury from that, despite the hard rubber on the bottom.
Totally. Yeah, I think that's those are all great points. I mean, I'm a fan. Like I like them. I use them, but I do know that they're not if someone walks in my office with plantar fasciitis, I'm not going to throw them in a pair of barefoot shoes. They'll be screaming at me.
Yeah,
There's a time and a place.
it's time and exactly. That's I think that's the truest thing. There's a time and a place, and like I'm sure if you get invited to a wedding or some fancy event, you'll
Yeah,
probably wear dress shoes and not barefoot shoes. So, what's great about custom orthotics is that they're shoe agnostic. One of the actually marketing ideas we had was to say something like every pair of shoes can be, what was it? Every pair of shoes can be your most comfortable shoes, something like that. Or
sure, sure.
every pair of shoes can have the benefits of barefoot shoes, something like
Sure,
this.
sure.
Um,
Which is
yeah,
cool because I feel like a lot of orthotic and I could be off on this. I'd have to ask maybe a podiatrist on it, but I feel like the what it seems like is a lot of orthotic brands, companies are kind of like the opposite of barefoot. Like, no, don't do barefoot. That's a bad idea. But you guys have almost kind of like a more nuanced, to not to use a buzzword,
yeah.
approach to it, you know?
There's a lot of buzzwords in the industry, and I do actually really subscribe to the benefits of barefoot shoes, and I would say that our orthotics kind of provide those benefits in
Mm,
other styles of shoes.
I love it. No, that's
Yeah,
awesome. All right, so a couple other questions I had here. So again, in the frequently asked questions category. So you had just mentioned this, so I want to jump to this. So like what type of conditions can this help? We mentioned plantar fasciitis already. We mentioned some of the pronation, supination a little bit already. One thing you just mentioned on is like up the kinetic chain, so stuff like knees, hips, low backs.
definitely. And I heard such a good analogy for this. I'm sure you're familiar with CTE, chronic traumatic
Yeah,
encephalopathy, that all the football players, actually football, including soccer as well, suffer
sure.
from. And the idea is just repeated impact injury to the brain as it shakes in the skull. And what's interesting is that the football players that get it the worst aren't the running backs that get just totally clobbered or the quarterbacks that get clobbered every once in a while. It's the linemen that just every
Sure.
single play are having that impact. And they don't have concussions after each game, but that sort of chronic injury over time is what leads to all the really bad neurological outcomes. And I I would argue that the heel striking and really thick soles on shoes lead to a similar concept up the kinetic chain, where because these soles are allowing for really powerful heel striking on generally hard floors that we walk on every day, that chronic impact that's happening in the cartilage and ligaments of your ankle, of your knees, of your hips, your back, and even your neck over time suffer those consequences. And that can lead to arthritis. It can lead to overlordosis with like back bending too much when old age, things like this. And our orthotics are there to prevent that from happening.
I like that. That's we see that a ton in the PT profession. It's like, and the common saying for that is like, oh, the straw that broke the camel's back. Like, oh, I went to reach down and pick up my pencil off the floor, my back went
Yeah,
out. Did I do
yeah,
it the wrong way? It's like,
yeah,
no, there's probably some other factors in there. Like,
yeah.
deals.
It's
Yeah,
years and years and years of doing a little thing wrong, you know?
right.
Yeah, it's the same thing in medicine too. And I think this is a really good kind of like overlap of the two of kind of inpatient medicine and outpatient PT. This is this is where you can prevent a lot of the more serious things from happening.
Totally. No, that's great. Um, and then another question that's frequently asked, like you mentioned a little bit already, the different types of footwear. Um, any anything that jumps out, and I think you guys had explained this to me a little bit before about. So we have like you have a certain type of materials or certain differences you use for like cycling versus running, walking, soccer, ski boots, even, and other types of footwear.
Yeah.
Does each of those sports have like kind of like differences in the materials a little bit that you use, or?
Yeah, so the material we use is all the same. It's always the TPU bioplastic, which is a really durable and it's just a very good printable plastic that a lot of things are 3D printed out of it. So it's a common material. I
Sure.
think the secret sauce is not the material per se, but the 3D printing strategy. So
Mm.
because we have so much control over the design, we can build different densities and different elasticities of the orthotic throughout. And if you compare that to what most podiatrists do in the US, for example, where it's really just a big piece of plastic with a couple of pads on it, it allows us to really hone in on what aspects of the insole can be changed to improve sports performance. I think one of the most obvious ones that I can describe is for golf, where we put a little additional ridge on the lateral sides of the orthotic, which give you just that slight additional amount of traction and to increase the torque during the swing. And we see that people have like a slightly higher club head velocity when they swing a golf club wearing our insoles immediately. And over time, that effect actually
Wow.
increases. And every sport has its own little thing where a little more posting on the lateral side or a little bit more toe grooves here will provide this much control there. It, I can go on about it for any particular sport, but you can imagine that the foot mechanics for skiing can be optimized with the right amount of tractional modalities built into the orthotic.
Very cool. Yeah, on the website, I think you had listed too, like uh for example, like the running one has like this more of a moisture wicking, maybe
Yeah,
properties to
yeah,
it.
sorry.
That
Yeah,
food.
so and that also has to do with the size of the grid that we put in to the orthotic. So I think you have one of, and you can see on the bottom that there's like a grid structure, and we can vary the size of that grid to allow for more moisture wicking for running shoes or running insoles.
Very cool. All right, quick last few questions, and we'll
Yeah,
start to wrap up and get you out of here.
cool, cool.
So one thing you mentioned early on in the podcast was how long it took with a podiatrist to when Greg was in France to get
Yeah.
those to get when he was dying walking around France, his feet were killing him. He couldn't give him time. So how long does the whole process, like step by step, take from like I guess when I download the app to when I receive them to my doorstep?
So I'll tell you how long it takes me to do it since I created it and know it from, I can do it with my eyes closed, and then I can tell you how long it took my mom to do it for the first time.
Okay.
She is not tech savvy. So for me at this point to download the app, do the foot scan, answer the questions, record a gait analysis, and press submit. That takes me about 2 minutes. My mom, the very first time, I'm not going to include the amount of time it took her to figure out how to download the app, but the entire thing took her about 5 minutes. So I would
Wow.
say for between 2 and 5 minutes, depending on your technological savviness. Um, it takes our podiatry team anywhere from 24 to 48 hours to come up with the insole design. And then to print takes another day usually, and then we ship it out. So um, we say that it should arrive in 10 to 14 days, but often it's much sooner
Cool, cool.
from submission of the order, which again takes like a couple minutes.
Very cool. So realistically, if you're from the when you scan your foot, it should take, I mean, total time anywhere between that like 10 to 14, maybe an extra 2 days if it's
If
taken like,
other way around, so really it should be we say 14 days just to be safe, but it really should be closer to the 7 to 10 days. But
oh,
14
nice.
to be safe, yeah.
Very cool. Oh, yeah, that's super quick. Um, and then general, I know it's probably dependent, but general price range for people that are kind of listening in, like what are we talking for a price range for the insoles?
Yeah, so we are actually changing the price quite soon, but right now on the website, 200 bucks. And you can
200.
use HSA.
Very cool.
Yeah,
And that if they were to do it themselves, obviously if they see a PT, that they might get additional like screening analysis, and there could be
exactly.
a different charge if you go in person. But that's kind of like general price you'd expect to pay is that around
Exactly.
that 200. You're not looking at like $1,000. You're not looking at like $20. It's kind of like around that 200.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
And then how long do they last?
Great question. So on average, around 2 to 3 years. If you're a professional marathoner, probably closer to 18 months. But for the typical user who goes to the gym a couple times a week, maybe goes on a run a couple times a week, 2 to 3 years is the average.
Is there a way that you know that they're no longer good anymore, or if it's just like if it hits that time frame, like it's probably trying to swap them out?
Honestly, the thing that gives isn't the body of the insole, but we put this vegan leather lining on top to make it look nice. Yeah, exactly, and that can wear down with enough kind of frictional wear. Um,
Gotcha.
the reason we put that on, there's a tiny foam layer, so for a little bit of comfort, but over time that foam layer will get compressed, as I was speaking about the other orthotics. Um, but the reason we really put it on there is when I go to like CVS and I see the orthotics that you can buy over the counter, they're always like these like orange colors or greens, like these really bright, crazy colors. And when I was speaking to people about like why they do or don't use orthotics, a really surprising number of people said like it kind of looks embarrassing in my shoe, and I can relate. Like I remember like every once in a while you go to a friend's house, they ask you to take your shoe off, and you don't want someone looking in and being like, what the hell is that like ugly orange
Right,
thing
right.
inside? And I thought like, what if it actually looked like elevated the shoe rather than kind of looks like it detracted from the style. And
Sure.
second part is it's kind of nice. I mean, I have them in my shoes now, and like every morning when I go to put them on and I see the Stride Soles logo and everything, it's kind of like it reminds me that like I'm doing something good for my health, that this what
Hmm.
I'm about to put on my foot is actually going to like improve my performance. It's going to make my feet less fatigued throughout the day, and it really does provide a little bit of an emotional boost that I think people don't think about when it comes to their insoles and their shoes. So that was the idea behind it.
I like that. Um, this one of the last questions is again a little bit of nitty gritty, and it may vary person to person, but one of the common questions I get for a lot of things, and probably a lot of podiatrists get as well, is like, is there any way that people can get this covered by insurance? I know you mentioned HSA is HSA FSA, yes, but any insurance that will cover
Yeah,
in there?
it's a great question. It's something that we're actively looking into. I will say that a remarkable amount of the orthotics that podiatrists make currently are not covered by insurance,
Right.
upwards of 90%. It's something that, for whatever reason, insurers are not that excited about covering. That said, we do provide a super bill, so if someone has, someone can submit it to their insurance if their clinician prescribes it to them, and we have had cases where they've been covered. But in general, the orthotics that are covered by insurance are either for like pediatric, very severe cases that require kind of AFOs, or the
Right.
ankle and the rest of the leg has to be also stabilized. Or if specifically for diabetes and diabetic neuropathy, there's certain types of orthotics that are covered. But in general, the typical custom orthotics that you think of are surprisingly not covered.
Yeah, I kind of knew the answer to that, but I just wanted to hear it out loud, and for the audience, obviously too. But yeah, it's interesting how it's like it's just one of those things that it seems like it should, but it's just yeah,
And yeah, and podiatrists know this, and they charge a lot,
yeah,
and people
yeah,
pay a lot out of pocket, and that was like one of the huge motivators to start Stride, is to make something that's affordable. Depending on your area, custom orthotics from a podiatrist can be $500. I know Greg, my co-founder, was paying $1,200 per pair.
yeah, yeah.
So the 200 is actually, uh, it's insanely more affordable than what you would get if you went through the entire process of going to a podiatrist.
Totally, totally. That's great. All right, so last thing to kind of wrap up. So I guess anything else you want to plug, shout out. Obviously, Stride Souls is the big one, and then the follow-up question to that, or anything else like coming up, any other events like anything down the pipeline. And then the last question, so I'm hitting you with all three right now. I'll repeat myself, but the third one is a favorite quote. So the way I describe this is so you're in Boston, so you're like 93, 95, pick a highway.
Okay.
Uh, so you get a billboard for the day, and you can put a favorite quote or just in general something that like you want to say to your community on the billboard. So you can think about that. But first one, I guess like anything else like down the pipeline, anything exciting coming up for the future?
Yeah, so we just are starting a partnership with this triathlon community out in San Francisco. So we're excited to do that. And we're also doing some clinical trials with Northwestern University's golf team. So we're excited to see the results of that, and hopefully to help them improve their scores overall. And I totally forgot to think of a good quote, but I did come up with something a long time ago for Stride Souls, which I wanted to be our tagline, but I got vetoed out. But given the opportunity, I would put it on the billboard, and I want it to be like a big picture of like a Roman style painting of Achilles, you know, and
Cool.
I wanted to say, "Don't let your heel be your Achilles heel," and then Stride Souls. I thought that would be the coolest
I love
advertisement.
that. I love that. You could use that as your secondary. I think there's secondary quotes or mottos and
Yeah,
stuff
if we ever
there.
go through a rebrand, it'll be that. Yeah.
That's great. All right, cool. So I'll wrap up with that. I know you got to run. You got a busy day ahead of you, but thank you so much for being on. I'm gonna end the recording and then I'll say bye right afterwards. But
Awesome.
yeah, Roadie Strength Podcast. We're signing off.